Welcome to the Laverne Church of the Brethren's weekly audio message. Here at the Laverne Church of the Brethren, we create a Christian community called by Christ to be inclusive, caring, and peace-minded. We affirm that people of any race, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, economic status, faith tradition, or life situation are welcome in our congregation. We believe in compassionate service, stewardship of creation, respect for diversity, and nonviolent reconciliation for differences among all people, nations, and faith traditions. We claim no creed but the New Testament as exemplified by the life of Christ. We strive to follow the way of Jesus. And through these efforts, we seek to grow ever closer to the mind and heart of God. And now let us ground ourselves as we enter into today's message.
A story by A.W. Tozer. On a dangerous seacoast where shipwrecks often occur, there was once a crude little lifeboat station. The building was no more than a hut, and there was only one boat. But the few devoted members kept a constant watch over the sea. With no thought for themselves, they went out day and night, tirelessly searching for the lost. Some of those who were saved, and various others in the surrounding area, wanted to be associated with the station and give their time, money, and effort to support the work. New boats were bought and new crews trained. The little lifeboat station grew. Some of these new members of the lifeboat station were unhappy that the building was so crude and poorly constructed. They felt that a more comfortable place should be provided as the first refuge of those who were saved from the sea. They replaced the emergency cots with beds and put better furniture in the enlarged building. Now, the lifeboat station became a popular gathering place for its members, and they decorated it beautifully and furnished it exquisitely because they used it as a sort of club. Fewer members were now interested in going to sea on life-saving missions, so they hired lifeboat crews to do this work. The life-saving motif still prevailed at this club's decoration, and there was a memorial lifeboat in the room where the club initiations were held. About this time, a large ship was wrecked off the coast, and the hired crews brought in boatloads of cold, wet, half-drowned people. They were dirty and sick. Some of them were foreigners. The beautiful new club was in chaos. Immediately, the property committee hired someone to rig up a shower house outside the club where victims of shipwrecks could be cleaned up before coming inside. At the next meeting, there was a split in the club membership. Most of the members wanted to stop the club's life-saving activities because they felt that they were unpleasant and a hindrance to the normal social life of the club. A small number of members insisted upon life-saving as their primary purpose and pointed out that they were still called a life-saving station. The small group's members were voted down and told that if they wanted to save lives, they could begin their own lifeboat station down the coast. They did. As the years went by, however, the new station experienced the same changes that had occurred in the old station. It evolved into a club, and yet another life-saving station was founded. History continued to repeat itself, and if you visit that seacoast today, you will find a number of exclusive clubs along that shore. Shipwrecks are frequent in those waters, but most of the passengers drown. The meaning and application of that story is so simple and so clear that you can't miss it. And it describes well the focus of this sermon series, which is intended to describe what is at the heart of who we are as brethren people, to shed some light on that question that someone might have asked you once upon a time: what is that church that you go to? Or if you've ever wondered how to answer that question, or if you're new to this church and you've been wonder what kind of place this is, then this sermon series is for you. Hopefully, you'll discover something about what makes us tick as a particular family of Christians. And some of us who have been around for a while may need a refresher, something to remind us about who we are and why we're here. I love the phrase, the Church of the Brethren, another way of living. I had a professor in seminary, Dale Brown, who used to say that brethren were neither Protestant nor Catholic, but a third way, a different, more radical way. My mother used to say that the brethren were peculiar. She had a funny way of peculiar, she would say. So when I would go out at night and my mother in her prayer covering would say to me, "Remember who you are," I knew what she meant. I can't say I always lived up to it, but I knew what she meant. As a disciple of Jesus, our primary task is to go and continue the work of Jesus in the world. Is that right? To serve others, to meet the needs of people, just as Jesus did. Starting maybe with the people in our own families and in our own circle of faith, to serve each other with our gifts and skills and abilities. Some sing, some pray, some lead, some organize, some ushers, some greet others at the door. As it happens, there is a form in your bulletin this morning that we handed out today that indicates the various places where you could volunteer within the church. And we want you to fill that out today before you leave. And you can put it in the baskets. They're clear boxes in the narthex on a table. You can put that in there. So the question you should be asking yourself is, what is my passion? What has God gifted me to do? Where could I best serve within the life of the church? And if you don't see it on that form, then let's figure out a way for you to do it. And by the way, we need more greeters. I just say that because I'm in charge of that group. Experts say that people form a lasting impression of a person that they meet, or a place where they would go, or something new. They form their first impressions in the first 30 seconds. In the first 30 seconds. If that's true, then that means that our greeters are really important. It may also be true that the mood established by the greeters may set the tone for the entire morning for all of the folks at the Laverne Church of the Brethren on Sunday morning. It's a great opportunity to make somebody's day, to offer a wide welcome, to participate in making our church the friendly and welcoming and inclusive place that we say we are. So do you have a smile and a greeting to pass along? Can you give 20 minutes to the church once or twice or 5 or 10 times a year as a greeter? Well, we have a deal for you. All you have to do is mark that down, or call the church, or see me, and we will sign you up. Listen, another way of living, continuing the work of Jesus. The brethren went out of their way to help each other in history. Mutual aid is the term that we used. It included, but went way beyond taking food to sick people in the church. Sometimes they stayed with them for weeks or months until they got better. Sometimes you might have been asked to pay the taxes of someone who couldn't afford theirs. Wow, talk about mutual aid. If there was someone in the church whose barn or house burned down and you were expected to help rebuild it, the amount of food prepared that was needed for Love Feast was always increased 2 to 3 times more in order to give away the excess to the poorer members of the church. Brethren families often shared clothing with other members of the church. Brethren neighbors helped each other farm, lending horses and equipment and themselves to bring in the hay or to harvest the corn. Mutual aid. But the brethren never stopped there. They carried that idea of serving others beyond the church doors, out into the world. I've mentioned my grandmother, who had a little farm off the highway, how during the Depression, these so-called bums would come to the house asking for help. Grandma didn't have much, but she had chickens, and so she would make them an egg sandwich and coffee, and while they rested on the back porch, Grandpa would talk to them to see if there was some other way that he could help them and pray with them. In telling that story, I've discovered many other brethren who have that same story in their background. To do what Jesus did. He's our guy. What he did all day long, day after day, he healed people who were sick, he helped people, he comforted people, he taught people, he prayed with people. Some of what he taught them was to give food to the hungry and water to the thirsty, hospitality to the stranger, love to the enemy, a cup of cold water to the needy. The brethren are known for doing just that. Help for the elderly, building places like Hillcrest. There are 24 of them around the country. Help for the orphans, building hospitals and medical facilities around the world, building schools and colleges everywhere they went. We've got one here. Drilling for clean water in villages around the world, giving cows and horses and chickens to poor people from Puerto Rico to China, taking in the unwanted and indigent, immigrant and exile, helping the suffering and the unfortunate. It is in our DNA. We do not know how not to do it. We're a servant people. At least we're supposed to be. And when we forget, it's helpful to remember that Jesus' first followers sometimes forgot too. That's what Matthew 20 is all about. In the first part of the chapter, Jesus told a parable about some laborers who were hired to work in a vineyard. The landowner decided to pay everyone the same wage regardless of how many hours they had worked during the day. Those who were hired first started to complain. They didn't think it was a very fair deal. Jesus concluded his teaching by saying in verse 16, "So the last will be first, and the first will be last." Verse 19 tells us that Jesus was headed to Jerusalem to face suffering and death. He took the disciples aside and told them that he would be mocked and flogged and crucified. And then at verses 20 and 21, in contrast to what he had just said about the suffering servant, we read that the mother of James and John came to Jesus with her sons behind her, and kneeling down asked a favor of him, Jesus. James and John are eager to have their mom go to bat for them. Maybe they thought they'd have a better chance with Jesus if she made the request for them. Kind of funny. These so-called sons of thunder, as they were known, to be hiding behind their mother's skirt. Grant that one of these two sons of mine sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom, she said. Warren Wiersbe comments, Jesus spoke about a cross, but they were interested in a crown. It's really easy to get our motives out of whack. James and John were interested in glory, position, rank. They wanted to be the closest to Jesus, and they wanted to be higher than anybody else. And their mother wanted the best for them. To her, greatness meant having power and authority. Greatness meant getting all you can for yourself. The other 10 disciples heard it, and they were indignant with the two brothers because they were thinking, why didn't I think of that? I can't blame them, but they were all guilty. Jesus replied to her request in verse 22 by saying, you don't know what you're asking. There's a price involved in greatness, one they knew little about. When it comes to greatness, the way up is down. The way over is under. You do not ascend to greatness, you descend to greatness. Greatness is not exalting yourself, it is humbling yourself. It's not lifting yourself up, your wants, your needs, your desires, your opinions. It's what? What is it? Jesus says, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must first be your what? Servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life. It sounds like their world was similar to ours. Greatness means having power, having people work for you. It's an office with a view. Teams of people just waiting for you to say what you want them to do. Cling to every decision that you make, being in control. It means having the biggest house and the fastest car and the smartest kids in the best schools and having every advantage that life has to offer you. It's when people listen to you. But do you know what the problem is with that kind of greatness? It doesn't last. Somebody else will eventually have the job you have and inherit your money and take over your business and get the respect that belongs to you. And even when you think you have met this world's definition of greatness, it will never be enough. There will always be another accomplishment to obtain, more money to make, more trophies for your cabinet. Jesus used a word to tell us what greatness is all about, and that word is servant. God says that those who will be called great for all eternity will be those who serve others. And the world needs a people who will continue the work of Jesus in that way. A peculiar people who will love others, who will reach out to a hurting and dying world. It needs a people who will take its ministries to the front lines. As one brethren used to say, we need to get our religion down where we can milk it. Service to others has always been an important part of Brethren belief and life. Ever since its beginnings in Germany, Brethren would even go so far as to take the place of their neighbors who were put in prison. I don't think they'd even let you do that today. Or the first Church of the Brethren in America, Germantown, Pennsylvania, who regularly took offerings for the poor in a permanent poor box just inside the door. It is embodied in the practices of the church and the lives of many members who seek to serve others as Jesus did. Let's take a little survey. The Brethren Service Center, located in New Windsor, Maryland, was a major center for gathering and sending food and clothing to all corners of the country and the world. If you've ever volunteered at the New Windsor Service Center or any of its satellite sites, stand up or raise your hand if you can't stand. There you go, thank you. Emergency Response Service Ministries sends clothing, health kits, cleanup kits, school supplies, and other necessary items as needs arise. If you've ever helped to put together any of those kits or supplies, please stand or raise your hand. Thank you. An active disaster relief program in the Church of the Brethren dispatches teams of volunteers to help shattered community rebuild after a disaster, some to construct and repair homes and other buildings, some to take care of children, and some to care for other needs. If you've ever volunteered in disaster relief or children's disaster services, stand up or raise your hand if you can't stand. Refugee resettlement assists people fleeing from brutal and oppressive conditions in all regions of the world, largely as a result of war and civil strife. If you've ever been one of those who assisted in any way a person or a family to relocate as a refugee or displaced persons, or sponsored maybe a student through International Christian Youth Exchange, stand up or raise your hand. Brethren people started Heifer Project, just down the road from where I grew up, as a matter of fact, as a way of helping hungry people around the world to get the resources they needed to raise their own food with livestock or animals, bees, goats, rabbits, seeds of all kinds, and it became an interdenominational, international program. If you've ever raised money or donated money or participated in raising or taking animals to Heifer Project, stand up or raise your hand. Wow. Yeah. For more than 75 years, Brethren have been working through alternative service, civilian public service, and Brethren volunteer service to train and send volunteers to projects in many states and countries, beginning in Puerto Rico. If you've ever participated in brethren service, stand up or raise your hand. Global Mission Partnerships shares God's love in countless countries around the world and aids economic and social development with first-hand marketing from items from third world artisans and craftspeople through Serve. If you've ever bought or sold a Serve item, stand up or raise your hand. Yeah, right. The youth young adult office of the Church of the Brethren plans work camps for junior and senior high and young adults each summer, with hundreds of young people giving time to do service in a hands-on way. If you have ever participated in a Church of the Brethren work camp, stand up or raise your hand. In addition to these denominational ministries, which have an incredible scope given the size of the Church of the Brethren, there are also varieties of brethren service ministries offered by local congregations and individual brethren. One of the things I notice when I go around to various churches and talk to brethren of all theological stripes from all around the world, it is a common denominator, this interest in serving others in the community and around the world. It's what all brethren have in common. Being a volunteer, whether it's volunteering in a local food pantry, or being a volunteer at a local hospital, or a school, or a blood drive, or walking for CROP, another program started by the Brethren, by the way, or a cancer walk, or working in a prison ministry, or pregnancy center, or preparing and serving food for Hope for Home, raking leaves or fixing something for someone who can't do it for themselves, making blankets or towels or quilts, hats or mittens for relief, gathering up food or clothing for people who need help, choosing a vocation in medicine, social work or teaching, justice work, working in the Peace Corps, visiting a friend in need, offering help to a neighbor. The list goes on and on. If you have ever participated in any of those things, stand up. Come on, get some exercise. Thank you. You may be seated. Listen. We are a servant people. Enough said.
We're so glad that you listened to the message today. If you're looking for an open and affirming, peace-loving, and justice-seeking congregation, consider visiting us for in-person worship on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. We'd love to meet you.